And good afternoon, everyone joining me online. I could see that. All right, let's see this. So we'll quickly cover on Indian economy. It has gone around an hour more than what I would have desired it to be. So we will quickly finish up on that. And then we will try talking on microeconomics after that. Some of you are sending me your answers, and I'm liking them, especially on Evergreen Revolution. So some more of you can also try. I won't mind it at all. Because the answer that you are shaping up looks nice, and that's the basic idea, that ultimately it should be your answer individually developed. So do it like that. Let's see this. So we will begin first where we ended yesterday. If you recall, the last thing that we were doing yesterday was on a talk that we were doing on public sector's role in an economy, and we had written all the benefits that public sector creates. There is one benefit that unfortunately I had missed yesterday. So I will put it across. So आप बस क्या करो, उसमें 5 points लिखे होंगे आपने. You write the 6th one. उसमें एक 6th point add कर लो. 6th point, I again repeat, this is on the role of public sector. So 5 points you have written. I'm making you add a 6th point to it. There was one more announcement. I'll put it on the group also. Because this is all festive right now, some people had requested me. Of course, when you request me these things, you don't put it on the group. You put it on the individual message, but that's understandable, and I don't mind it at all. But some of your friends have, and some is quite a number at the moment, have requested me that if I could take this Saturday's class next Saturday, I'll do that in that case. That some people are still at home and they would like to come back here and do things. So if you recall, we had planned a class this Saturday. We will just put it for next Saturday. All right, that is the only thing. So this Saturday, you can have an easy life. You won't have to see me. Next Saturday, you will get to see me. I hope I am clear on that the class we had planned on 29th is the class, 30th rather, is the class we will have rather on the next Saturday. All right, 29th ki class, 5th ko karenge. That is the only thing. All right, so this Saturday's class, we will do next Saturday. Rest everything remains as usual. All right, so coming to this now, 6th point you write, public sector institutions, this is the 6th point that you can write. Public sector institutions have also helped in promoting research and development in India. Research and development in India, especially in the field of defense research, comma, space research, and pharmaceutical firms. Full stop. Many public universities have been engaged in path-breaking research related to internal security, comma, information technology, etc. Sorry. So these are the contributions. In case somebody sometimes asks you what were the contributions of public sector, you can mention that across. In fact, I will put another question for you, but that will come later when I will ask you to critically analyze the economic development of India during the pre-liberalization period. It can also be to critically analyze the industrial development of India in the pre-liberalization period. Such questions can be asked, and please don't end up only criticizing. It won't help you. All right? It should be a critical analysis where you talk about what are the benefits that happened in that period and what are the challenges that have happened, and then of course we can give a conclusion. So we will practice those questions, and I'll get you used to those. But remember, this is a part of it, that if somebody says, okay, analyze public sector, then public sector was not only creating problems across, or did not only have challenges, there were contributions also of public sector. So these are some contributions of public sector that we talk about. You write below that, challenges of public sector, challenges of public sector, and you write first in that, poor pricing strategy, poor pricing strategy, in which, poor pricing strategy in which many commodities were priced, many commodities were priced below even users cost, below even users cost. I can believe you recall we had done that there could be users cost, where at least recover the cost of production, and there can be rate of return approach, that try charging commercial money out of that. So below users cost, comma, while they should have been priced, while they should have been priced at least on a minimum rate of return approach. Minimum rate of return approach. In case you have to elaborate on this point, I'm just saving time at the moment. In case you have to elaborate on this point, you can use the elaboration we did on the 4 ways of pricing strategy in public sector when I was teaching you India, the GDP growth trend and all. But right now, this much can be sufficient in case you are writing even a longer answer. Second point then, you write, second, lack of adequate capital infusion. Lack of adequate capital infusion. Now that is another big challenge they had. Remember, public sector on its own was not earning profit. Since it was not earning profit, capital was one problem. The second problem was that government did not have enough money to put into public sector. Now that meant 10 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old machines used in public sector. It also meant technology was always backward, and that kept pushing public sector behind the possible growth that they could have achieved. So in that you write, there was low infusion of capital in many public sector enterprise, in many public sector enterprise, comma, especially in heavy industries and infrastructure industries which continuously needed upgradation. That was one more challenge. These enterprises needed continuous upgradation, but that part was again a missing point here. In the same thing, you please write, this was because there was loss incurred by public sector, which meant that their capacity to reinvest was limited, I hope I am making sense to you on that since they were incurring a loss, their capacity to put the money back was limited. So their capacity to reinvest was limited, and government had limited resources, which compromised its capacity to provide budgetary support to public sector. All right, that was again a factor. Then you write in the same point, this resulted in use of outdated machines, and poor technological coefficient. As students of economics, I can easily tell you this. When you make the production function, so we develop a production function as Q as F of K and L, output as a function of capital and labor, and then you put an A as the technological coefficient. All right, it is output as a function of capital and labor, and you put an A as the technological coefficient. How high is this A is the question mark. So if your technical upgradations are poor, then this A will be small. All right, and if this A is small, it in a sense means that your capacity to produce is limited. All right, that is the aspect to keep in mind. So always remember, whenever they talk about technological upgradation or technical input, it's nothing but this A that we talk about in any production function. I mean, those of you who might be used to a Cobb-Douglas production function, you would have seen something like this at times, you know. Now this is the technical coefficient. that we talk about. So the technical coefficient part suggests that how good is your production function, that given a capital and given a labor, how good you can produce in your output, and that A, higher it is, better off you are, and lesser it is, worse off you are. All right, that is the aspect. For those of you for whom it is completely new, don't worry. In the micro part, we will be discussing Cobb-Douglas in some detail. I will be talking to you on how this operates. But this is the basic idea at the moment, that this A is what we call technical coefficient or technological coefficient, which actually determines the overall efficiency of production function. It actually determines the overall efficiency of production function. I can believe till here we understand this? Okay. Then you write the third point, third challenge for public sector. Overstaffing. Now see, when we use this term overstaffing, again remember it's a relative term, not an absolute term. Please keep that in mind. Overstaffing is a relative term, not an absolute term. Overstaffing, it cannot be said that, okay, this company has 100 people, it's overstaffed. No, it depends on how much you need and how much you have. So in case you need one person for a job, and if you have kept, say, 2 people for that job, you are overstaffed. All right, so public sector on an average in India was overstaffed to the ratio of 1:1.4. So in that sense, if there are 100 people needed, 140 people were there. That was the problem part. So you write in that, put a dash and write, several public sector enterprises showed large presence of overstaffing due to political interference, comma, the responsibility to create lower end jobs and inability of managers to stop including more workers when the firm did not require them. So these were the factors. Political interference was a big factor. The whole idea of winning votes by giving jobs. And these jobs were not created on the upper end of public sector, but on the lower end of public sector. In the same thing you write, it led to high wage expenditure and low labor efficiency. High wage expenditure and low labor efficiency. Therefore, it resulted in increasing cost increasing cost and reducing profitability in the public sector. All right. Then you write fourth, lack of optimal choice of production capacity. Lack of optimal choice of production capacity. So the government sometimes would choose production capacity at a level which would suit their vision, the plan, the grandeur, but maybe the market was not yet prepared for it. So we have several examples of excess capacity in public sector. I can use this word. Excess capacity means you have created a higher capacity, but the demand for the product is not as much. You have created a higher capacity, but the demand for the product is not as much, which means that your firm is running without using the capacity that you have created. For example, suppose if you have created a capacity to produce 100 units of electricity, but the market and the technology and the input doesn't support producing more than 60 units of of electricity. That means you have excess capacity of 40%. You understand that? So a lot of public sector was performing in that manner. They had excess capacity, large firms built, but they didn't have the capacity to produce in that same manner. So you write within that, presence of excess capacity, presence of excess capacity, that is larger size of the firm, compared to the requirement of the market comma, availability of inputs, and availability of enough skilled workforce led to lack of recovery of high fixed cost. How do you recover a high fixed cost? By producing more. Because if you produce more, your average fixed cost will fall. And if your average fixed cost is falling, you are better off. You understand that? The way you recover your high fixed cost is by producing more. Reduce your average fixed cost. All right, so that is the basic idea. So that is one, high fixed cost and created loss for public sector unit. This was observed in power generation, comma, heavy engineering and mineral-based industries. Mineral-based industries. And then you write fifth, the requirement of balanced regional growth, the requirement of balanced regional growth comma sometimes led to reduced efficiency in choice of location. You know, the one of the examples I can give you of this is developing a fertilizer plant at Sindri in Bihar, or developing a cashew nut processing plant near Salem in Tamil Nadu. Now, these plants were never meant to succeed. These plants were created at places where the raw material source or the input source itself was far away. So when you create that institution, okay, I'll give you an easier understanding because that was in news in March. So hopefully that should come to your mind straight away. Why do some power sector firms, electricity producing firms, suffer due to lack of coal almost on an annual basis in India? अभी इस साल मार्च में भी न्यूज़ में था ना कि कोल नहीं पहुंच रहा टाइम पे, पावर जनरेशन प्लांट्स परेशान होंगे, इंडिया में कोल की क्राइसिस हो जाएगी, अब इलेक्ट्रिसिटी की क्राइसिस हो जाएगी. चलो वो हुई नहीं, बच गए हम फिर भी. बट व्हाई डू वी हैव दिस every year? March, of course, was quite a new experience. Normally, we have it in October, November. You know that in October, November, after monsoon, practically every year this drama begins. This year, since it had happened in March, we were better prepared in October, November, so it never came in news in that case. But in October, November, it was a given deal that this had to happen, that power sector will have a problem, coal will not be supplied on time. Because the objective of balanced regional development was good, but then we started creating power generation plants in those areas which were far away from their source of raw material, that is coal. So now you needed coal to be supplied to these areas. But then during monsoon, the supply of coal would be restricted because the ability to supply coal will be restricted. You know, that was during monsoon. You would very often see that during monsoon, plus remember many places in India, coal is still transported in open containers. मतलब ब्रिटिशर्स की याददाश्त नहीं छोड़ना चाहते, वो हमें ओपन कंटेनर में लेके जाते थे हमारी चीज़ों को, हम भी आज तक उसे वैसे ही लेके जाते हैं. So coal is transported in open containers, and along with that, coal is transported at times, through many places which have very heavy monsoon rain. Now that means that when monsoon comes to India, for around 3-4 months, the transportation of coal stops. So by the time monsoon ends, and say it's around October or November, the stock with the production companies is very limited. Now in 1970s, it was one more bad news for India, that was, or for Indian electricity generation companies or railway companies and all, that we were not importing coal, we were not allowed to. So government said India has a huge resources of coal, use Indian coal, you're not allowed to import coal. Now the power generation company is located at one corner of the place, the coal mine is located at another corner of the place. The location may not always be wonderfully connected, and that is one example of how poor location of the production plant resulted in inefficiency. Now you would say, sir, what could be done? See, what was the problem part? We thought we will bring efficiency by locating heavy investment plants across India. What we did not realize is that it is not necessary that all places in India are suitable only for large industries. A better idea could have been to develop plants in India or factories in India or production units in India based on comparative advantages of the state. If we could have done that, then we would have had the logistical cost reduced, we could have had more efficiency in linkages, and that could have given us much higher return. But they were not days of thinking linkages and efficiency and production costs. They were just days of thinking big. Make it big, make it large, grow more, and that is what will give you efficiency. So people thought, okay, let's make these plants and they will give us growth. But this was a problem that their location itself was inefficient. That was the problem part, that the location, think, what does the plant at Sindri produce? Anybody has an idea? Which fertilizer do they specialize in? They specialized in phosphorus-based fertilizer. In Sindri in Bihar, the plant specialized in phosphorus-based fertilizer. Later on converted to urea, but initially it was for phosphorus. Now think, phosphorus is an imported commodity to India, and the import did not happen through Nepal. I'm mentioning Nepal because Bihar has an international border with Nepal. Now that import was not happening through Nepal. That import was not happening through Bangladesh. Interestingly, that import was not even happening through eastern coast of India. So the import was happening through the western coast of India, mainly on the Mumbai port, not even the Kandla port, mainly at the Mumbai port. Now imagine phosphorus is coming to Mumbai, then we take all the effort to transport it to, say, Sindri, and then we expect that to be produced and so on. The problem was that this is too much of a locational disadvantage. You understand that? So no matter how good you produce, the cost of production will remain high. Another problem was that it was thought that if we set up a factory in Sindri, Sindri is just an example, but that applies true on many places in India where public sector was located for balanced regional development. So it was thought that if we set up a factory in Sindri, then the adjoining areas will develop because of this factory. That did not materialize. Some of you can be coming, I don't know, but maybe some of you can be coming from places like Bokaro, or places like Raurkela, or places like say, Dhanbad, or Bhilai. Even these cities were expected to develop the adjoining cities also. That did not happen. These cities remained developed. ये अच्छे developed city हो गए. इनके अंदर के internal infrastructure ठीक हो गई. But इन cities में भी अगर आप देखोगे, जो industry के पास का area है वो better developed है, और जो बाकी की cities है उनकी हालत खराब है. Now that became the problem point. That it was thought that these industries will develop and the cities around and the civic infrastructure and so on. But what happened was, even the civic infrastructure and the city-based development was quite okay in the places nearer to the industry, places under the management of the industrial managers, but in rest of the areas it was not also conducive. So leave alone the adjoining areas, these places did not even develop all the areas within themselves. That became challenge too. Then what happened? Within 15, 20, 30 years, 30 is also an upper length, but within 10, 15 years, these companies will start becoming, or these factories will start becoming unproductive, unviable. And then rather than revitalizing them, closing them down, thinking an alternative, the government would keep running them on all those outdated machines, etc., which will finally reach us in a position where they had to be closed down because of complete lack of efficiency. You understand that? So that was one big challenge of poor locational choice. The intent might have been good. That okay, let's choose the location of a backward region, and the backward region will then grow with public sector along with it. But the application was poor. And in Indian context, you will hear me saying this n number of times, and n will be greater than 15, 20. So that we have to keep in mind. That is the trouble part if we look at it. Then in the same thing, fifth point, you write, it led to high logistical cost. It led to high logistical cost, poor efficiency, and lack of profitability. Leading to closing down of many enterprises. This was the other challenge that we talk about in public sector. So these are the challenges. I told you the benefits. Also remember, if somebody asks you, so does that mean public sector was not efficient for India, or didn't do any much good for India? The answer is no. Without public sector in those days, India would not have seen what we are seeing today. So we needed public sector in those days. The complaint is on inefficiency of public sector. The complaint is not about why public sector existed. You understand that? सवाल ये नहीं है कि पब्लिक सेक्टर बनाए क्यों, सवाल ये है कि बना के उसको ठीक से अप्लाई क्यों नहीं किए. All right? So if we had invested so much money and done so many things, we should have worked better on it and made them more efficient. So the question we are raising is that. So in your conclusions also, you should be raising that public sector contributed to high growth in India, industrialization in India, investment in India, even supported private sector in many cases. For example, public sector banks doing priority sector lending and helping many small scale enterprises, or public sector banks doing priority sector lending and helping many private agricultural farmers. So public sector was helping the private sector. Public sector creating, like Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited, supplying inputs to private plants also in India. So it is not that public sector has not contributed to that. The question is that efficiency started going down and we didn't do much, or we didn't take many steps to make them efficient. Do I believe this can stay with you? All right, that always conclude whenever you are writing. I have two reasons of telling you this. One, this is a fact also, without any doubt, otherwise I wouldn't have said it. Second, your paper can be corrected in India at times very often by people who have not yet left their mindset on the left. So this kind of a conclusion gives them some balm. You know, कि अच्छा ठीक है, ये outrightly dismiss नहीं कर रहे हैं public sector को, क्योंकि outrightly dismiss करना भी नहीं चाहिए. Public sector has its own importance in India's development story. 50s and 60s India wouldn't have developed had it not been for public sector. But that is what 2022 India has to discuss, and I will discuss it when I'm teaching you India after 91. That is what 2022 India has to discuss, that do we need public sector as much today as what we needed in those days? And in what field do we need them, and in which field we don't need them, so that we make a better choice of investment in public sector today. You understand that? So always be willing to understand it in that manner. अगर कोई ये कहते हैं कि आज public sector की utility कम है, उस या किसी particular field में कम है, उसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि public sector की utility उस field में हमेशा ही कम थी. All right? If somebody claims today that public sector is less useful in a particular field, it doesn't mean that public sector was less useful always in that particular field. It only means that today private sector has grown enough and government can withdraw from these fields, and government can actually focus more on other areas where government is more or is badly needed. That kind of mindset you should have in writing your conclusions, doing discussions, talking to people in interview. This kind of a mindset you should always have, rather than saying that no, public sector are useless, or they have not been of any use, or they have been a burden on India. No, they have not entirely been that. If public sector banks were not there, whatever limited banking reached the rural areas, it wouldn't have reached rural areas. Private sector would have never invested in places like Steel Authority, or Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited, or an NTPC. We needed public sector to do that. You understand that? So the groundwork in India was done by public sector. All right, keep that in mind. All right, now this is public-private debate. We are settled on that. I'm giving you one more question, and I know I've given you too many questions without giving you the answers. I will be giving you answers also, but I'm giving you one more question. You please keep that question in mind. I'm putting it for you. Examine the role of socialist policies in industrial growth of India before 1991. You can mention administered price mechanism. Yes, Akanksha, you can say that public sector could be used for savings, which they were trying to do. Administrative inefficiency was one. Yes, the answer will be same, Samarpan. Industrial investment is investment done in industries, Aman. I hope it makes a point to you. Uh, Public sector was overstaffed, was determined, Ishan, by finding out how many optimal workers are needed and with how many do you have more than that. Okay, there is one question that one of your friend asks. So Devyani, I'm answering your question. Isn't it a sunk cost fallacy that producing more just to recover fixed cost, even if it is loss-making venture? So, if we recover the fixed cost quickly, then the venture doesn't remain loss-making. That is the basic idea. I hope I could answer that. Yes, huge debts of discoms, etc. can work. Low number of rakes. All right. Logistical cost, Aditya, is the cost of transportation, packaging, and so on in the supply chain. That is logistical cost. All right. We will discuss the main reasons for disinvestment. You will have to wait till India after 91 on that. Now see, okay, there is one more question that I want you to think over. I'll not fully answer it right now. That can we say that it's better to develop a service sector in underdeveloped zones rather than factories, etc. The problem is service sector will also need some basic infrastructure like electrification and educated workforce. Normally you will see both of these missing in areas which are not very well developed. So service sector won't be very easy to develop in these regions. All right. Now, when we look at this here, and there is another question that one of your friend asks that we chose mixed economy, but it seems as if socialist economic policies were pursued on a larger basis. Why so? Remember, we chose a mixed economy, but we always were intending to move towards socialism because the ideological support was for socialism. All right, that was the basic idea. That we chose a mixed economy because we couldn't be a socialist economy for the reasons we have already discussed, but the ideological background was to move towards a socialist economy. Also remember, there was a huge belief in India, especially the Indian intelligentsia and the Indian politics, that socialist policies can bring high growth to India one day. You understand that? If you see, with no pun intended, but even the song that I see my socialist friends singing is "We shall overcome someday." Now, that itself puts an infinite horizon onto pictures. So we got to be careful there. That when you look at things, you have to put finite horizons on your achievement. When you put finite horizons on what I have achieved, and keep testing off on where was I earlier, where am I today, and is it an improvement or not? So if you are going on an improved direction, it's still okay. Then check the speed. That is my speed correct? So if the direction is fine and the speed is fine, then you can keep moving in the same direction for some more time. That policy check has also been missing in India. We choose a direction, and then if somebody says, okay, let's try changing a little, we also become pretty reluctant at that. All right, now I'll give you the answer to the question on mixed economy. The question on the choice on mixed economy at the end of the class today. In the meantime, we can begin with some microeconomics, beginning with cardinal utility theory. So you can give a heading, microeconomics, and we begin with cardinal utility theory. Yes, I'm deliberately keeping it for one more question. All right. I'm answering something relevant. It can come to your mind also, that we had to do the role of private sector. I'll just put it as a question and make you write that, because there are only 250 words in it. But I want enough time to do something substantial in micro. That's my only purpose. All right, so I'm picking it up at the moment, and I will be giving you. Okay, so that we don't forget, why don't you take another question by the side? Explain. This was a question asked in UPSC exam also in one of the past years. Explain the role of private sector in pre-liberalization period in India. Explain the role of private sector in pre-liberalization period in India. In this section, few things I've given you in your notes, so you can always use your notes for that. Few things I will, of course, teach you. I mean, teach you in the sense that I'll make you write, but majority of the explanation part is in your notes, so you can kind of take that explanation part easy. All right. But I'll add few more things to this, depending on how they have asked in the past year papers. Okay, so I believe you have taken these things down. Now, we begin with microeconomics. And within microeconomics, we begin with cardinal utility theory. And for one more time, I'm assuming you have read NCERT, if you are not with economics background. All right, so cardinal utility theory is what we then talk about. Now see, when we talk about cardinal utility theory, if you ask me, and this was given by Alfred Marshall, later on, additions were made by Pigou and Jevons. These 2-3 people were the major contributor to cardinal utility theory. You know, Alfred Marshall was someone who started the talk in the late 19th century, and then the talks continued. They were all Cambridge economists. So the talk continued, and gradually they started talking about the cardinality of utility and all. So what was the question that they were asking? Please understand. This theory is derived from the section of microeconomics which is called consumer behavior. You know, it is from section of microeconomics which we call consumer behavior. Consumer behavior implies predicting why does a consumer choose what she chooses at any point of time. So if a consumer is choosing to buy X amount of commodity at some P amount of price, then why is she choosing X only? Why not more than that or less than that? That was the question that Marshall started raising. You understand that? सवाल ये उठाया जाने लगा कि एक प्राइस पर एक पर्सन एक पर्टिकुलर अमाउंट ही क्यों खरीदते हैं, उससे ज्यादा क्यों नहीं खरीदते, उससे कम क्यों नहीं खरीदते. Alright, that was the question raised. That why should one buy a particular amount? Why not more than that? Why not less than that? And that was the beginning of the talk on consumer behavior. This started the talk on consumer behavior. That why do consumers behave the way they do? Then further questions started getting raised. Why do people buy less when the price is increasing? Why do people buy more when the price is decreasing? So cardinal utility theory was the first attempt to answer these questions. Remember, cardinal utility theory, when I say it's the first attempt, was a time when economics did not have any maths in it. There was no question of any maths in it. Calculus was not used at all with economics. Now all that made Marshall's job a little more difficult, because it was more difficult now to connect how people are responding, because there could not be a mathematical proof to all that. It was all intuitive, and he was trying to use intuition to answer what would be. So the first thing, I'll go by your notes and we can build upon it. Yeah, both questions 150 words, definitely. So in your notes, when we talk about assumptions, the first was cardinality of utility. I'm explaining it to you. Anything extra needed, I will make you write that. So the first was cardinality of utility. All right, so the idea was that utility is measurable in quantum. All right, utility means satisfaction. So Marshall said you can measure utility, you can measure satisfaction, and you can express a unit for it. All right, so when he said first, we are talking about the assumptions of the theory. First, cardinality of utility. So the thinking was that utility can be measured by whatever is the satisfaction of the people. So the idea was satisfaction is measurable. Now see, satisfaction is measurable. The assumption here was satisfaction is measurable in a quantified manner. All right, you can measure satisfaction. You can say, oh, I liked it a lot. I did not like it at all. You know, विभास सर ने कैसा पढ़ाया, बेकार पढ़ाया, अच्छा पढ़ाया, बहुत खराब पढ़ाया, बहुत अच्छा पढ़ाया, ऐसे बोल सकते हैं. पर ये नहीं बोल सकते कि कल तक तो 4 kg अच्छा पढ़ा रहे थे, आज 5 kg खराब पढ़ा दिए. You understand that? So that cannot be said because ideally it's difficult to quantify utility. So Marshall assumed utility can be quantified. Then there were later on, it was added by Pigou and then Jevons, who created the concept of util as the unit of utility. The way weight can be measured in kg and money can, and your length can be measured in meters. They said utility can be measured in util. Satisfaction can be measured in util. So 1 unit of satisfaction will be 1 util. All right, 1 unit of satisfaction will be 1 util. And remember, we are doing microeconomics. So this 1 util will be different for each person. Like sometimes people say that util is not defined well. It cannot be, it's a subjective idea. And that is one of the problems of cardinal utility theory. You're trying to define objectivity with a subjective idea. See, we are trying to say that this is something objective, 1 util. But my 1 util can be different from your 1 util because both of us can have different methods of assessment. You understand that? But in those days it was thought that all this doesn't matter. We are just assuming that utility is about utils, the terms in which it can be measured. So sacrifice can be measured, is measurable. In a sense, it is quantifiable. And how do you make it quantifiable? By using what is called util. All right, sacrifice is quantifiable. And how is it quantifiable? By using what is called util. All right, that is one action or one point that we talk about. Then remember, the second assumption that I take for you is independence of utility for it's not form, it's for different commodities. Please correct that. Independence of utility for different commodities. Independence of utility for different commodities. Now mind you, when we say utility or satisfaction is independent across commodities, when we say satisfaction or utility is independent across commodities, it means something like this. Be careful here. It means that if suppose I am consuming 3 commodities, let's call them X1, X2, X3. Let us say they are bread, tea, and clothes. Then this kind of a theory says that the utility I derive from bread, if you add it to utility I derive from tea, and add it to utility I derive from clothes, you get total utility, implying that utility is additive. Now remember, when you take such an assumption, you are ruling out complementarity. You understand that? When you take such an assumption, you are ruling out complementarity. आप 2 commodity एक साथ use करके जो satisfaction पाओगे, उनमें अलग अलग थोड़ी ऐड कर सकते हो दोनों को. जब आप कहते हो I am deriving, it's like this. Think, when we take tea and we take satisfaction from all ingredients of tea. ये नहीं हो सकता है ना कि आप पानी पी लोगे, दूध पी लोगे, चाय पत्ती खा लोगे, चीनी खा के गैस पे हिल लिए. ऐसा तो नहीं हो सकता. You know, it doesn't give you any satisfaction. So when you talk about utility, tea gives you utility based on the entire drink. So this theory somewhere was assuming that you can derive utility separately, that you will take utility 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, that is, you will say, take separate utility from one and from another and from third. Now that was again an extreme assumption, but Marshall took it because Marshall wanted to show that demand for each commodity will be tentatively independent of another commodity when the consumer has to choose about it. All right, that was his intention. That when I'm demanding a commodity, then I'm not bothered about the other commodity. I'm only bothered about this commodity. Remember, all the assumptions in microeconomics would often take you towards ceteris paribus, everything else remaining constant. So if you're assuming everything else remaining constant, so in that case he said, look, then in that case the utility also remains constant from each unit. I can just add them up. Another very strong assumption that he took was constant marginal utility of money. I am assuming we can understand the meaning of terms like marginal utility, satisfaction derived from each extra unit. Total utility is the total satisfaction derived from all units of a commodity consumed. Marginal utility is satisfaction derived from one extra unit of the commodity taken. So when I say marginal utility of money, it's the satisfaction you attach to 1 rupee. When I say marginal utility of money, it's the satisfaction you are attaching to 1 rupee. All right, and putting it in a simpler way. So what is the satisfaction? How many utils? So say for a second, if you say that my marginal utility of money, the satisfaction I derive from money is 2 utils, then in a sense it means that you are saying 1 rupee is equal to 2 utils. That if you get 1 rupee, you get as much satisfaction as 2 utils. Similarly, if you lose 1 rupee, you lose as much satisfaction as 2 utils. I can believe you understand that. That is the idea of marginal utility of money. Now Marshall said that marginal utility of money is constant. That was because he wanted to use money as a measuring rod of satisfaction. He was basing it on the function of money, that money is the commodity in terms of which you express all other commodities. Money वो चीज़ है जिसके टर्म में आप बाकी चीज़ों को एक्सप्रेस करते हो. When you talk money, you can say, look, this shirt is for 5 rupees, or this mic is for 10 rupees, or this watch is for 2 rupees, and so on. That kind of a talk we do. Now, that is measuring everything in terms of money. So Marshall said, look, since you can measure everything in terms of money, that means money can be the measuring rod also of utility. But remember, money can be anything can be a measuring rod only if its own value remains constant. See, what is a measuring rod? A comparison base, a standard. आप measurement किससे करते हो? जो खुद standard बने, उस standard से compare करोगे. जैसे ऐसा सोचो, अगर मैं बोलता हूँ कि मेरा वजन 88 kg है, जो कि है भी, और अगर by chance आपका जो वजन है वो मेरे ही height के साथ 70 kg है, तो हमें कैसे पता कि आप मुझसे पतले दिखोगे? क्योंकि हमने सेम ग्रेविटेशनल पुल को माना है अर्थ का टू मेजर आवर वेट. You understand that? When you say you are, say, 60 kg and I say I am 88 kg, and assuming we are same height, then we are taking the same gravitational pull of the earth as the standard, and we say, look, 88 and 60 have a meaning now, because we define what is meant by 1 kg, and then put the units. The problem comes in here with, if you don't take money as a constant. If we say, I derive this much satisfaction in terms of money, and therefore it can now be compared to what satisfaction I derive in terms of commodities, then if money satisfaction itself starts fluctuating, then how will you do the comparison? It's like I come to you, and suppose we are same height, and you are 70 kg, I am 88, and I come to you, I tell you I am lighter. And you say, how come you are lighter, sir? I measured my weight on moon. But I changed the standard, no? And I looked lighter because of that. So Marshall assumed that the utility from money will remain constant, marginal utility. What does that mean? When we say marginal utility from money will remain constant, it means satisfaction that we derive from each extra unit of money, that is from each extra rupee, will always remain constant. Satisfaction that we derive from each extra unit of money, that is from each extra rupee, will always remain constant. That is the meaning of constant marginal utility of money. All right, that satisfaction that you derive from each extra unit of money, that is from each extra rupee, will always remain constant. That is constant marginal utility of money. But does that happen? And think individual, don't think people. Like, don't think like this, that yes sir, rich people have less utility from extra money, poor people have more. No, that's not microeconomics. So we are not talking that. But think your utility when you have 100 rupees in your pocket from 1 rupee of money compared to your utility when you have 1 rupee in the pocket from that same unit of money. They are vastly different. You don't give the same importance. You understand that? So that is why in real world, marginal utility of money doesn't remain constant. But Marshall had to keep money as the measuring rod of utility. Since he had to keep money as a measuring rod of utility, he said marginal utility of money remains constant. All right? In real world, marginal utility of money doesn't remain a constant, but Marshall had to keep money as a measuring rod of utility. So he said that money utility from money should be taken as a constant. So remember, we say constant marginal utility of money, that is money will be used as a measuring rod of satisfaction, and this means satisfaction from each extra unit of money always remains same. All right, that is what you need to keep in mind. Now see, this is one of the most important assumptions that Marshall had taken, because this became the major point through which he could prove his theory. But I'll take you into that. Then there was a fourth assumption that Marshall took in his cardinality, that was rationality of consumer. Rationality of consumer. What does rationality mean? I read it in economics books. They said that it means you take all your decisions for your own satisfaction. I read many people writing in newspapers, unfortunately, who don't fully understand economics, saying that, look, economists expect people to be selfish. So they say that people take all their decisions only to satisfy themselves. Yeah. I've seen many people saying this, including some economists too. Poor them. हाँ, क्योंकि पूरा सब्जेक्ट लाइफ लॉन्ग पढ़े और सब्जेक्ट ही नहीं समझे तो दुख होता है फिर. But think of it. What does rationality imply? Now think, rationality implies that I will not be affected by an externality. Rationality doesn't make you selfish. Rationality says I will not take decisions on the basis of what pleases others. I will take my decisions on the basis of what is exactly what I feel is beneficial to me. Now that is not selfishness. Please be willing to distinguish between the two. When you say I will not take a decision based on what pleases others, you are only saying that I will take a decision based on what my brain, my system accepts as being correct. And you'll say, sir, what's the difference between the two? Well, think, if I have affection for you, because if that comes to your mind, but if I have affection for you, then it's rational for me to look at your presents. You understand that? अगर मुझे आपसे प्यार है, तो जो आपको अच्छा लगता है मेरे लिए रैशनली मुझे अच्छा लगेगा, और जो आपको अच्छा लग रहा है वो मुझे ठीक से अच्छा नहीं लग पा रहा, तो हमारे प्यार में कुछ डिफरेंस है फिर. और ये जितनी जल्दी मैं समझ जाऊं उतना बेहतर हमारे लिए. You understand that? If what you are liking, I am not exactly liking that, then that means if I am claiming, oh, me and you are one people, that's a false claim. Then let's be careful about it. You understand that we can't be same people then. We are different people and we need to have our own rationalities and we should decide accordingly. Because maybe for few months or few years, I can do that. Okay, I'll give you an example, you will get my point. If suppose I have a kid and I'm celebrating the first birthday of the kid, because I want to enjoy the first birthday of the kid, and in the process I want that enjoyment to be shared with 10 other friends of mine, and I call them over, and they are also there on the first birthday of the kid, and we are all enjoying that first birthday. The kid is very familiar with all these 10 friends of mine, and the kid doesn't mind who has come to the house. वो सबके पास चला जाता है क्योंकि वो इन 10 दोस्तों को जानता है मेरे, उनके पास बार बार जाता है, तो उसको देखा उनके पास भी चला गया, उनके साथ भी खेल रहा है. So kid has a nice birthday, I have a nice day, my friends are happy, and I am happy because my friends are happy, and I am happy because I wanted to celebrate that birthday. That's rational. But if I am celebrating the first birthday of my kid, Because I feel that if I don't celebrate this first birthday, then the society will take me as a miser. And what will people say? That he didn't even celebrate the first birthday of his kid. So, okay, for all the difficulties, but it doesn't matter. Let me celebrate this first birthday of my kid. Then I will be irrational. Because now I am calling people not because my kid knows them and I know them. I'm calling people because I want people to be satisfied that somehow they came over and first birthday was celebrated and they were in the invitee list. Please understand the difference between the two. In first case, I'm rational, I'm doing the same thing. In second case, I'm completely irrational. I'm doing it not for myself. I'm doing it not for the kid whom I love. I'm not doing it for the friends I love. I'm doing it just to please some random people whom I generally don't bother about, but today I am more bothered with what will they say about me. That is what economics suggests is irrational. So if you are a rational person, it doesn't mean you are an unloving machine, mechanical robo. If you are a rational person, it only means you can justify all the actions that you have taken. Many times we don't justify the actions we have taken. You know, that is the only point. ऐसे ही मजाक कर रहा हूँ, लेकिन जो दूसरे तरह के लोग होते हैं, वही 15 साल बाद जब वो किड बड़ा हो गया, अभी 15 years old later, the kid is now 16 years old. After the first birthday, 15 years have gone by. As a 16-year-old, the kid will have his own views or her own views. One day the kid expresses those views, saying, look, I don't agree with you. I don't think you are right. Now, if it was happening irrationally, I can bring out those pictures or I can recall for the kid how much I did for you. Because I never did it for myself. I did it for the kid. तो मैं पकड़ के उसको बोलना शुरू करता हूँ, मैंने तेरे लिए क्या नहीं किया. And please understand, I am explaining it to you to make you understand that why economics defines. मेरे बेटे को एक बार किसी ने बोल दिया कि पितृ ऋण बहुत बड़ा होता है, वो आपको चुकाना चाहिए जीवन भर. To my elder son, somebody told me this. He said that, the fathers do a big favor to you and you must do things for them. He came along and he shared it with me. He said that particular uncle, somebody from my relatives, he said, उन्होंने ऐसा समझाया है, so what can I do for you? I said, look, I don't know what I have done for you, but every time I see you, whatever I have done for you is all taken care of. Because you give me so immense happiness right from the day you were born. So in that case, all that I have done for you is taken care of, because I don't do it for you, I do it for myself, I enjoy that. In fact, to be honest to you, even yesterday I had to leave early because of that. This nice person, what he had done is he had gone to his hostel and then missed his keys. No, that's not the laughing stock. You know what he did? He put the keys in my bag, which came along with me over here. And that's what I got to know just before your class. So I said, look, I can't leave the class right now, so I'll have to take the class and come to you, but I'll finish the class and I'll come immediately to you. So that's why I finished your class, and you would have seen my driver had brought my wife because she had few other things of mine, my lunch, etc. So I said, okay, so I took my lunch in the car and I drove off from over here. मैंने अपने ड्राइवर को बोला कि गाड़ी लेकर आप दूसरी वाली घर जाइए, मैं ये गाड़ी लेकर उनके पास जाता हूँ. बट मैं आपको सच बता रहा हूँ कि अगर मुझे आपसे ही अफेक्शन है, जैसे मैं आपको पढ़ा रहा हूँ अभी, तो मुझे अगर पढ़ाने में अच्छा लगता है, आपसे अफेक्शन है, तो रैशनल है कि मैं आपको ज़्यादा देर पढ़ा सकता हूँ. लेकिन अगर मुझे इस बात पे आपत्ति है, तो फिर ये रैशनल काम नहीं कर रहा हूँ मैं, मुझे कुछ और करना चाहिए. That is my only point. So economics, please understand, rationality simply means that the decisions are not based on externalities. Decisions are based on individual choices. All right, so never confuse rationality of humans with, or economics assumption of rationality with selfishness. Now, I gave you this lecture for a reason. In the last 3 years, Professor T.C. Anand has asked this question to from three different people. Professor Anand is an economist and a very decent one at that. He was also the chief statistical officer of India. He was also my professor at Delhi School now, and at a point of time my colleague also at Delhi School. But मैं हिम्मत नहीं करता उन लोगों को colleague कहने की, उन्होंने मुझे पढ़ाया है तो मैं हमेशा उनका student ही रहता हूँ. But Professor Anand is someone who knows his economics very well. He's a Cornell PhD, gold medalist, in fact. So Professor Anand knows his economics very well. And he knows these things, and he always tests people with economics optional. He asks them these kind of questions. He asked this from one of the students last year also. Thankfully, I had trained him by then. But he asked this question that, do you think being rational is being selfish? So please take a call. Say it's not being selfish, it's taking decision based on, that is what the economics system says, decision based on with system which is internal and not affected by any externalities. So there is no positive externality affecting me, there is no negative externality affecting me, and I'm taking a decision, then I am rational. Of course, real world humans don't take decisions like that always. Positive externalities affect them, negative externalities affect them. But if you take a decision based without externality, you are being rational. I hope this much can remain with you. I can believe all of you understand the meaning of the word externality. Events which can influence you without you having a control over them. All right? Events which can influence you without you having a control over them. For example, if you have a roommate and you have an understanding with that roommate for next 1 year, none of you will leave the room, even if you want to. And suppose this roommate has a habit of listening to Bon Jovi 3 o'clock in the morning. That also without earphones. Now you have a negative externality. क्योंकि 3 बजे हार्ड मेटल बजना शुरू होगा. तो उस केस में आपके लिए एक्सटर्नैलिटी है. On the other hand, there can be positive externality. If same roommate has a habit of listening to a song which you also like, but that's not part of the deal, but that roommate listens to that song, you also listen to that song, and you don't have to do any effort for that. You understand that? That's positive externality. But you can't tell the roommate one day, why don't you play the song? That's not in your hands. That's completely in their hands. So you can't affect the event, but you are affected by the event. The typical textbook example in economics is smokers, non-smokers as roommates. And typical textbook example in economics is a steel mill dumping pollution into a river, and the fishery which is taking things from that river. These are all examples, typical examples of externality. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the term, externality simply means that an event is affecting you, influencing you, but you cannot have a control on that event. कोई एक चीज आपको अफेक्ट करेगी, असर डालेगी, पर आप उस चीज पे अफेक्ट नहीं, ओवर कंट्रोल नहीं कर सकते, तो उसे कहते हैं एक्सटर्नैलिटी. ऑलराइट, लाइक कोविड पैंडेमिक फॉर all countries except the Chinese was an externality. Nobody could control that. You know, maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist, you bear with me, but I have a strong belief that Chinese were manufacturing a virus and it got out of control. You know, because the dictatorial countries are quite prone to doing that. They will do that. You will say that democratic nations also do it. Look at the Americans. Of course they do, but they have more checks and balances because they are democratic. They can't afford such a thing. Dictators don't bother much. They say, okay, 10 people die, that's okay. It's fine. If 100 die, that's even okay. You know, so in a dictatorship, they live life like that. So you know, they're prone to experiment in that manner. But any which way, we won't be going that side. But that kind of thing, externalities mainly can be, again I repeat, events which are not in your control, but which have an impact on either your utility or your productivity. All right, so any of these two, positive or negative, they can have a positive impact, they can have a negative impact, but they are not in your control. आपके कंट्रोल, जैसे मैंने आपको एक टेक्स्ट बुक एग्जाम्पल दिया फिशरी और स्टील मिल का, तो अगर एक स्टील मिल पॉल्यूशन डालते हैं रिवर में जिससे कि मछलियां मर जाती हैं और जो फिशरमैन है वो मछली नहीं पकड़ पाते, तो फिशरमैन स्टील मिल को कंट्रोल नहीं कर सकते, पर स्टील मिल के वजह से उनको नेगेटिव झेलना पड़ रहा है. All right, so that is a negative externality that towards the fishery and the steel mill. So that fishermen cannot control the steel mill production, but the fishery production suffers because of steel production, and that is a negative externality. So again, I repeat, rationality typically implies that there will be no positive externality and there will be no negative externality. Now, what was the theory that Marshall introduced? So this is actually the fifth assumption that Marshall took. You can just take it as that. But he gave it as a law, even though he was assuming it, but he gave it as a law. So you just give a heading, law of diminishing marginal utility. Law of diminishing marginal utility. We'll just quickly discuss few things in this. No, actually a large chunk of people can affect each other, Akanksha, but the final decision is always yours. Don't forget that. All right. Now see, when we say diminishing marginal utility, first you try understanding this. You just write a line below that. You write, according to the law, as an individual consumes as an individual consumes more units of a given commodity the satisfaction derived from each successive unit goes on becoming lesser. So, if we take, say, quantity of commodity, let's say this commodity is called X, and if we take total utility from commodity, whenever you see this term total utility, it is total satisfaction derived from all the units of a given commodity. All right, that is total utility. All right, so whenever we use this term total utility, it is the total satisfaction derived from consumption of all the units of a given commodity. Now see, when we look at quantity of commodity, let us say 0, 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, and of course, when we don't consume anything, we assume total utility to be 0. Then suppose I just take a random table. This much can be sufficient. So suppose this is the table that we create, that my total utility rises from 0 to 10 as I consume the first unit. Then when I consume the second unit, it rises to 18. Then third unit is 24, then 28, then 30, then 30, then 28. That means that I am happy consuming till the sixth unit. I am fully satisfied at the sixth unit. After that, the commodity starts giving me dissatisfaction. Again, I can use typical textbook examples to make you understand it. For example, if you tell me, sir, I like pizza, and I give you one pizza, followed by another one, followed by another one, and followed by another one, assuming you have a tummy which is fillable, then by the time you are eating your fourth or fifth pizza at most, you will feel filled. And then if I give you one more, you will start having a stomach ache. So that is dissatisfaction. Please understand, when we talk marginal utility, that is why this is satisfaction derived from each extra unit. This is satisfaction derived from each extra unit. And if we take for first unit, it is undefined. And then if we see, it starts falling because the satisfaction derived from the first unit is 10. From 0 units, it's undefined. That's why I put a dash. All right? When you are not consuming anything, obviously there is nothing marginal before this. Now, at this level, it is undefined. Then from only the first unit, your satisfaction was 10 utils. Second unit, the satisfaction was 18 utils. So the addition done by the second unit was 8 utils. Addition done by the third unit was 6 utils. Addition done by fourth unit was 4 utils, and so on. Now there was no addition done by sixth unit, so 0 utils. And in seventh unit, you lose 2 util satisfaction, so you have a 28 value. So remember, negative marginal utility implies dissatisfaction. All right? Negative marginal utility will simply imply dissatisfaction. So when you are in this zone, you're saying that I am dissatisfied. So the theory given by Marshall was law of diminishing marginal utility. What he was saying was that if you take commodity X and take total utility, you will get a graph like this. All right, that utility increases at a decreasing rate. Do I believe you're familiar with this language? When marginal utility is falling, it means utility is increasing at a decreasing rate. Something like this, that utility is increasing at a decreasing rate. Every next unit is adding something lesser than the previous unit. Every next unit is adding something lesser than the previous unit. So that is why total utility is rising, rises up to a point. Say this can be your sixth unit, and after that point total utility starts falling. So this becomes my total utility curve, where it is increasing at a decreasing rate and then it starts falling. All right, total utility. So if somebody asks us how is the behavior of total utility curve, it increases at a decreasing rate, reaches maximum, and then falls. That's total product. This is total utility. And बस total common है दोनों में. All right. Now, when we talk on this, understand this here, total utility increases at a decreasing rate here means that marginal utility is greater than 0 but falling. All right, total utility increases at a decreasing rate is same as saying that marginal utility is greater than 0. चूंकि marginal greater than 0 है, इसीलिए total बढ़ रहा है. Since marginal is greater than 0, that is why total is rising. But marginal is falling, that is why total utility is increasing at decreasing rate. The same table that I have drawn. And then when we say total utility reaches a maximum, it means marginal will be 0. Again, from the table you can cross check. When total utility reaches a maximum, marginal will become 0. Why? Because until marginal is rising, total cannot reach a maximum. And if marginal falls, total will come down from that. So the point of stability, as we see in differentiation also, that the point of stability is when you have your slope 0. So that is the idea. Total utility reaches maximum when marginal utility is 0. And marginal is nothing but slope of total. Marginal is nothing but the slope of total. Total का rate of change बता रहा है ना marginal. तो marginal को क्या बोलेंगे? Slope of total. The slope of total curve is marginal curve. Utility, cost, production, everything applies there. And then when we say total utility falls, that means marginal utility is negative. All right? When we say total utility falls, that means marginal utility is negative. So remember, if we talk about drawing a marginal utility curve here, if we take commodity X and try drawing a marginal utility curve here, assuming say this is my sixth unit, then you will draw a curve which will be continuously falling, reach 0 here, and then decline. Well, it can be a curve, it can be a line, depending on how the functions are, but that is marginal utility curve, that it keeps falling with the rise in total utility. It's undefined, of course, nearer to 0, and then it goes on, reaches its 0 when total utility is maximum, and then becomes negative when total utility is falling. So it's falling when total utility is rising, but it is positive. When total utility is maximum, it is 0, and when total utility falls, it becomes negative. All right, so that is the marginal utility curve. All right, so marginal utility is what tells us how total utility will behave, or the other way around. So if you know one of these, you will know the other one, obviously. All right. What does area under the marginal give us? Total. Just keep these points in mind. I'm not applying them immediately, but keep it in mind. ये जो area है ना इसके नीचे, this area, this also gives you total utility. All right, area below the marginal will always give you total up to that level of output. All right, area below the marginal starts giving you total up to that level of output. All right, so area below marginal utility will give you total utility function curve or idea. But remember, if marginal utility becomes negative, then if you take the area, you will have to add this and subtract this area. All right, because this is the negative zone. But I don't want you to go into that direction right now, so I will pull myself back. Yes, yes. हाँ ये तो होगा, ये पॉजिटिव और ये नेगेटिव, तो सब्ट्रैक्ट करोगे तो मिलेगा टोटल यूटिलिटी जो भी आया. ऑल राइट, इंटीग्रेट हो रहा है जो भी है. देखो, जब तुम टोटल यूटिलिटी को का स्लोप निकाले, मार्जिनल निकला, सारे स्लोप को ऐड करोगे तो टोटल ही दे देगा ना. दैट इज द आइडिया. ऑल राइट, नाउ सी, हर पॉइंट के स्लोप्स हैं. हाँ, तो स्लोप जो है वो हर एक्स्ट्रा, देखो मैं उनमें जाना नहीं चाहता, बट सोच के देखो स्लोप का मतलब क्या होता है. द रेट ऑफ चेंज इन द इनफाइनाइटली क्लोज नेबरहुड, है ना. तो इनफाइनाइटली क्लोज नेबरहुड से ही तो इंटीग्रल्स निकालते हो ना, इसीलिए वो एरिया अंडर द कर्व पे आता है. ऑल राइट, नाउ अंडरस्टैंड दिस. मार्शल यूज दिस आइडिया ऑफ डिमिनिशिंग मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी and the other assumptions that he had taken to give his theory of consumer behavior in case of single commodity. Now that's not in your notes, I'm giving it to you. So you give a heading, consumer equilibrium in case of consumer equilibrium in case of single commodity. An example of positive externality is your roommate listening to the song that you like, or a typical textbook example is beekeeping and apple orchard. So the beekeepers gain from the apple orchard and the apple orchard gains from the beekeeping keeper. These are all positive externality example. No, TU0 at 0 level of output, remember, at 0 unit there is no consumption, and that means before that there was no consumption. That is why undefined. Marginal is addition to total. Now there can be no addition to total unless you start consuming. Marginal utility holds for drinkers and smokers also. You will see that you start smoking in the beginning. Let's give you 20 smokes right in one go. Let's see how the 20th one looks like. Now understand this, I'll take a second. I deliberately took this question. The question was, does marginal utility not hold for drinkers or smokers? Well, it does, because remember, this theory is a static theory. Otherwise, it holds for no one. Time period is assumed to be constant. You know, time period is assumed to be constant. It's a static theory. ऐसा थोड़ी है कि तुमने एक बार खाना खा लिया तो दूसरी बार भूख नहीं लगती तुम्हें. तो ये कहना कि एक चपाती से दूसरे चपाती में कम सेटिस्फैक्शन है, वो तो यही सोच के है ना कि तुम दूसरी चपाती उसी वक्त खा रहे हो जिस वक्त तुमने पहली खाई थी. When we are saying that one unit gives you lesser satisfaction than the first one, that is assuming that you are taking all the units at the same time. But if I give you one pizza today and then I give you one pizza tomorrow, then the second pizza doesn't affect the consumption from the first pizza. So remember, even with drinkers or smokers or addicts, give them 20 glass of wine right on the go, and let us see what they do after the 20th glass. You know, they puke. You know, so I mean, I'm sure you have been to your college parties, even if you are a teetotaler. You have not seen anyone puking after drinking? You are a lucky fellow. You know, I am also a teetotaler, but I have seen many of them across my life. Or otherwise, you have people, or maybe you are someone yourself who has good enough capacity. You know, so coming to this now. When you talk about this theory, remember, the theory is static. This theory is not dynamic, all right? So you can't apply it over a time period. It's in the same time period. Now remember, there can still be exception to the theory. I'm not saying there can be no exception to the theory. For example, if you are someone who is who is into numismatics, coin collection, even at the same time period, if you get more coins, you are happy. Similarly, if you are someone who is a philatelist, say stamp collector, you get more stamps, you are happy. You understand that? So it's possible that the law of diminishing MU can have its exceptions, even with static behavior. But with commodities, generally the exceptions don't arise, because since it's a static behavior, it implies a static model. It implies that at the same point of time, you will always have your own share of dissatisfaction after a point of time. You understand that? No matter how much you like doing something or like something, after a point of time, at the same moment, it can give you some dissatisfaction. Then of course you can come back to it, rejuvenate it, fresh, and do that. But continuous is the problem here. Now, when we talk about a single commodity, Marshall worked it out like this. I'll tell you what he implied. I'm just getting rid of this diagram. So suppose now, if we assume that marginal utility of money, that was another assumption he had taken, I hope you would recall. In the same model, if we assume that marginal utility of money is 2, that means 1 rupee is equal to 2 utils. Implies effectively 1 util is equal to half a rupee. No problem with all that, isn't it? 1 util rupee is equal to 2 utils. So 1 util is half a rupee. Now understand this. Suppose we assume that the price of this commodity X is rupees 2. Alright? If we assume that the price of this commodity X is rupees 2. Let's do an exercise first. If I take marginal utility of the commodity upon marginal utility of money, a ratio. Now why do I take the ratio? You will say, sir, what's the need? I'll tell you. Marginal utility of the commodity tells you the extra utils. Say, let's take the first commodity. It tells you the 10 utils that you got from the commodity. And marginal utility of money, when you divide it by that, we there said is about 2 utils per rupee. यही है ना marginal utility of money, that I'm getting 2 utils per rupee, and marginal utility of commodity is 10 utils per, say, kg, just giving a random value to that. Now that means if I am converting it in money terms, ये रूपी ऊपर जाएगा. इसमें किसी को कोई आपत्ति तो नहीं है कि सर ये रूपी आप ऊपर लेके क्यों जा रहे हैं? तो अगर ये रूपी ऊपर जाएगा तो आप इसको ऐसा लिखोगे कुछ, ये util and util cancelled, and you are left with a 5 rupees per kg. That is what you get by this ratio. What does it show? It simply shows that when I convert from utils into rupee, then I am deriving satisfaction from this first unit equal to 5 rupees. I bought, okay, let's make it simple. I bought, if I buy 1 kg, I get a 10 util satisfaction here. True? And I attach 1 util satisfaction, or 1 rupee satisfaction to 2 utils here. So 1 util is half a rupee. If 1 util is half a rupee, 10 util will be how many rupees? वही लिख रहा हूँ. Alright? अगर बाई चांस आपके मन में आया कि ये तो कॉम्प्लेक्स हो रहा है, कुछ भी कॉम्प्लेक्स नहीं है. नॉर्मल यूनिटरी मेथड ऑफ मैथमेटिक्स है. That if 1 util is half a rupee, I am getting satisfaction worth 10 utils from this unit. That means satisfaction derived from this unit is 5 rupees. But how did I get it? I said, look, this is the satisfaction from commodity divided by satisfaction from money. So commodity gave me 10 utils satisfaction for every unit I consumed. आपको kg अच्छा नहीं लगता, आप liter लिख दो, मुझे कोई आपत्ति नहीं. Alright, I have no objections to you writing liter here. My point is, I write 10 utils per kg divided by 2 utils per rupee, and that means that given my marginal utility of money, for every unit I consumed here, I consumed satisfaction equal to 5 rupees. Do I believe you understand that? So now, when I write a 5 here, I can believe you understand what I mean by that 5. That 5 simply means, like if I do this, it will mean 10 divided by 2. That's 5. But what does that 5 mean? It means 5 rupees per unit of the commodity consumed for the first unit that I consumed. Similarly, from the second unit, how much is my marginal utility? 8. And how much is my marginal utility of money? That remains constant, right? So that is still 2. That means the satisfaction I get from it is worth equal to 4 rupees. All right, so I write 4. So you know how we interpret this? We interpret this as satisfaction derived from each unit in terms of money. जब आप ये रेशियो लेते हो MUX by MUM, X is the commodity, M is money. So when you take this ratio, marginal utility of commodity upon marginal utility of money, it simply means how much satisfaction do you derive from each extra unit of the commodity in terms of money. You understand that? So that's the only conversion we are doing. कि हर एक्स्ट्रा यूनिट से पैसे के टर्म्स में आप कितना सेटिस्फैक्शन डिराइव कर पा रहे हो. Alright, from each extra unit of commodity in terms of money, how much satisfaction are you deriving? That's what this ratio tells you. So similarly, when you take a 6 by 2, that is 3, 4 by 2, that is 2, 2 by 2, that is 1, 0 by 2 is 0, and minus 2 by 2, minus 1. This is your table for marginal utility of commodity divided by marginal utility of money. I can believe we understand the interpretation. अब कहानी सिंपल है. अगर आपका satisfaction ज़्यादा आ रहा है, मैं कुछ लिखता हूँ, आप बताना, और बोलूँगा भी, लिखवा भी दूँगा आपको. I'm writing something and I'll make you write that too, but think of it, if I get MUX upon MUM greater than the price of commodity, do I have any incentive not to buy it? Think of it. This is the satisfaction I get in terms of money. Satisfaction derived in terms of money. This is what I have to pay. So if I am getting 5 rupees satisfaction and I have to pay 2 rupees for the commodity, will I buy that unit or not buy that unit? Buy it. And I will keep buying it till I have a higher satisfaction. Over here the satisfaction becomes equal, and over here the satisfaction becomes lesser. Don't forget, this is all satisfaction in terms of rupee. And this is the rupee I have to pay for it, 2 rupees. You understand that? So till my MUX upon MUM is greater than PX, till my MUX upon MUM is greater than PX, I have no reason to stop buying. And when my MUX upon MUM is equal to PX, that's my optimum point. Because if my MUX upon MUM is lesser than PX, again I have no reason to buy this. I should not be buying this now, isn't it? So when should I stop? I should stop when MUX upon MUM is equal to PX. Alright? I should stop when MUX upon MUM is equal to PX. Do I believe it makes sense to you there? Alright, so I'm making you write it. You please take that down, then we go ahead further. If you integrate the area under MU, you will get TU, Deepthi. That is what I meant. Yeah, going on buying, correct. So you write consumer equilibrium is a situation in which a consumer has no incentive to change from consumption decision. Full stop. It takes place when satisfaction derived when satisfaction derived by consuming an extra unit of a commodity in terms of money in a bracket you can write MUX upon MUM. All right, MUX upon MUM, close the bracket, is equal to price of the commodity, is equal to price of the commodity. Full stop. Remember, sometimes in certain books, I'll make you write further, but just wanted a clarification for you in case it arises in your mind. So sometimes in some books, you will also see written MUX upon PX equals MUM. Now that makes no difference. Think, MUX can be 10 utils, PX is rupees 2. So when you consume the first unit, you get a satisfaction of 10 utils and you pay a price 2 rupees, which means the first unit gives you a satisfaction 5 utils per rupee. That is what you get from the first unit. But the utility you attach to money is 2 utils per rupee. Alright, जब आपने पहला unit को consume किया, then you get a satisfaction 5 utils per rupee. For every rupee you spent, you got a satisfaction of 5 utils. To money you attach a satisfaction 2 rupees per util. You see that? That 1 rupee is, half a rupee per util. You see that? That is how you attach satisfaction. You have all the incentive to buy it. Alright, that you are getting relatively more satisfaction than what is the value of money. So MUM tells you, when you see MUM and you get it in terms of, again, per util, you say that, all right, this is 2 utils per rupee that I get the satisfaction. So if it is 2 utils per rupee that I get the satisfaction, then that I pay for satisfaction, then at 10 utils per rupee, I should rather buy the commodity. Similarly, this will become, if you reach this point, this will, at this point, you will get 4 utils per rupee, 3 utils per rupee, and again at this point, what will happen? 2 utils per rupee. You understand that? While the satisfaction you are losing by paying money for that is also at 2 utils per rupee, you match there at optimum. So whether you look at it from MUX by PX is equal to MUM point of view, or you look at it from MUX upon MUM is equal to PX point of view, they mean the same. Why do they mean the same? They ought to. You know why? Because MUM and PX are constants. You change their position, it doesn't matter. Interpretation can change. I hope I am reaching you on this. All right? Yes, yes. Okay. Okay, and rather I'll give you a better word for it. You can say you are willing to pay 5 rupees for the first unit of the commodity. I'll tell you why I'm saying that it's a better word. When you study things like consumer surplus, you use a point that it is the difference between willingness to pay and amount actually paid. Alright, that is what we call surplus of the consumer. अब इनको ही ले लो, मान लो ये भाई साहब हैं, इनका हमने टेबल बना रखा है, ठीक है? तो ये जो भाई साहब हैं, इनका जो टेबल है, इनको अगर कोई कहते 5 रुपया देने को पहले यूनिट के लिए, ये तैयार हो जाते. You understand that for the first unit, the fellow was willing to pay 5 rupees, but the fellow actually has to pay 2 rupees. So the fellow has a surplus of 3 rupees on the first unit. Do I believe you understand that? That is consumer surplus idea. I'll teach you consumer surplus separately, but that is consumer surplus idea, that you derive it from what is my willingness to pay, and my willingness to pay is based on my satisfaction derived and how much I attach in money terms to that. So from the first unit, I'm getting satisfaction worth 5 rupees. So my willingness to pay will be 5 rupees. Or from the second I am getting satisfaction worth 4 rupees, so my willingness to pay is 4 rupees. It's a separate part that the producer expects me to pay 2 rupees. So from each unit, I am getting higher satisfaction compared to what was my willingness to pay. That is why market is a wonderful place where consumers say a thank you and producers say a thank you. Because consumers get their consumer surplus and producers get their producer surplus. But both are happy about it, that we got ours. So that is the basic idea of in any marketplace. So this is the consumer side of the market, of course. So yes, 5 rupees बिल्कुल कह सकते हो that is the value. और साथ में ये भी कह सकते हो कि that is the value that the consumer attaches to the commodity, that is the first unit of the commodity. All right, so do I believe that as a classroom all of you are clear that when we say MUX upon MUM, we imply it is the satisfaction derived in terms of money or rupee. When we say MUX by PX, it means satisfaction derived from each unit per rupee spent on it. All right, MUX by PX, that ratio is satisfaction derived from each unit. This is satisfaction derived from first unit for every rupee spent on it. अगर पहले यूनिट पे मैंने 1 रुपया स्पेंड किया तो उस 1 रुपये के बदले मुझे 5 यूटिल का satisfaction मिल रहा है. Satisfaction derived from first unit per rupee spent on it. And I will compare it to the satisfaction I get from money, that is 2 utils per rupee. That each 1 rupee gives me satisfaction worth 2 utils, so I'm getting satisfaction of 2 utils per rupee. So that is the comparison. You can make either of the two. There is no objection to that. Now you continue in this, you change the paragraph and write, at all points where MUX upon MUM is greater than PX, MUX upon MUM is greater than PX, comma, satisfaction derived in terms of money, satisfaction derived in terms of money is higher than satisfaction that is lost by paying a price for the commodity. By paying a price for the commodity. Full stop. In the same thing you write, again change the paragraph. Similarly, at all points where MUX upon MUM is less than PX, satisfaction derived is lesser in terms of money than the money required to purchase the commodity. Therefore, the individual chooses not to buy these units. The only point of stability the only point of stability is when satisfaction derived and price to be paid match each other. Change the paragraph again and write, Marshall used consumer equilibrium. Marshall used consumer equilibrium to define demand behavior demand behavior of the consumer. To define demand behavior of the consumer. For example, if price of commodity becomes more, then it means that individual will need higher satisfaction from the commodity, from an extra unit of the commodity. Higher satisfaction from an extra unit of the commodity. Higher satisfaction from an extra unit of the commodity to reach equilibrium. Full stop. MUM is marginal utility of money. MUM is marginal utility of money. So you write MUM is assumed to be constant. MUM is assumed to be constant, which implies that new equilibrium can be reached. New equilibrium can be reached after price increase. After price increase, comma, only by increasing marginal utility of commodity. Only by increasing marginal utility of commodity. This takes place when demand is reduced. When demand is reduced. In a bracket you can write, applying the law of diminishing marginal utility. In a bracket you can write, applying the law of diminishing marginal utility. Alright, applying the law of diminishing marginal utility. So obviously applying that law, if you want marginal utility to rise, you will need commodity consumption to fall. So with rise in price, demand becomes lesser. And in the same thing you write, similarly, any fall in price any fall in price will imply increase in demand as new equilibrium will be reached. I'm repeating myself. Any fall in price will imply increase in demand as new equilibrium is reached when marginal utility from the product also falls. New equilibrium is reached when marginal utility from the product also falls. I hope you get the point. What we are trying to do here is just develop a demand relation, just develop a demand relation that if you have any increase in price, suppose this price rises from 2 to 4. So if it rises from 2 to 4, it will mean that your ratios here will change only because of change here. This 2 remains a constant. And that will mean that now your equilibrium will need equality here. Like earlier our equilibrium was happening here. I did not speak it explicitly, but I'm assuming that all of you understand that at the 4th unit, when we had this 4 by 2, at this 4th unit, that was the earlier equilibrium, when the price was 2. Alright, जब price 2 rupees था, तो आपका MUX by MUM को 2 आना था ना, वो 2 कहाँ आता है? 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th unit. But if the price rises to 4, then the equilibrium will happen when you are here at the 2nd unit. Why? Because I'm just speaking the language I made you write. When price of a commodity increases, say from 2 rupees to 4 rupees, equilibrium will require that MUX by MUM also increases. But MUX by MUM can increase only with a rise in MUX because MUM remains constant. You understand that? Which means then that MUX can rise, but due to law of diminishing MU, we already know that MUX can rise only when demand becomes lesser. Do I believe you understand this? That is why we are claiming that when demand falls, my marginal utility from commodity X will rise, and that will mean my ratio will rise and become equal to the new price that we have assumed, rupees 4. Now, in case it's troublesome, think like this. I can get rid of this. Think like this. What we are talking here is, when you look at consumer's equilibrium, what are you looking at? You look at a situation where you take quantity of commodity, and suppose I take MUX upon PX on this axis, MUX upon PX, and I also take MUM upon this axis. All right? Now think, if you have or let's do it the way I did it there so that you don't get bothered. So if I take MUX upon MUM on the axis and I take PX on the axis. All right, so I'm taking price of X, MUX by MUM. The other way around I have given in your notes, so don't worry, you will have both sides of the story. Now think, this MUX by MUM can look like this. This is the table, isn't it? This MUX can MUM can keep going down. Is everyone okay on that? That as I consume more, my MUX falls, my MUM is a constant, so MUX by MUM continuously falls. Makes sense to all of us? All right. What I am saying is, along with that, this PX is a constant, right? Let's call it 2. This Px is a constant. So I will reach my equilibrium at say a point like E1, say on the 4th unit of quantity, when MUX by Px MUX by MUM मैचेस PX। जहां पे दोनों मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी का रेशियो प्राइस के बराबर है वहां मेरा इक्विलिब्रियम होगा, ये हमने निर्धारित कर रखा है। सो इन दैट केस दिस इज द पॉइंट ऑन द फोर्थ यूनिट दैट व्हेन प्राइस इज ₹2 MUX upon MUM is equal to 2 there. Now I am saying that if we say that price has increased to 4, will this line remain same or will this go up now? Okay, so the line goes up. Let's call it PX dash ₹4. All right. Now as the line goes up, it means, so earlier MUX upon MUM was equal to 2, that was equilibrium. अब सोचो अगर प्राइस 4 हो गया तो जो पिछला इक्विलिब्रियम था आपका वहां ये सिचुएशन आ गया ना। Your initial equilibrium was when MUX by MUM was 2, this whole thing, price was also 2. Now MUX by MUM remains 2, but price becomes 4. That means the satisfaction you are getting from the commodity is lesser in terms of money than the price of that commodity. So you need, for new equilibrium, you need the satisfaction also to rise. But we know that this ratio can rise only when the numerator rises, because denominator is a constant, and numerator will rise due to law of diminishing marginal utility only when demand becomes lesser. Diagrammatically, we see that happening, that when you reach here, let's call it E2, the demand can fall to say 2 units, and we can claim that at price ₹4, your equilibrium will happen here. You understand this? So now think, I just need you to be with me for a second more. If I take quantity demanded here also, and I take price over here, this is what we get. So initially when the price was PX, that is ₹2, we got demand equal to 4, let's call it QX, and when price rises to PX dash, say ₹4, demand falls to QX dash, say ₹2, say 2 units. If I join such points E1 and E2, then I get the demand curve. That is why, you know, the traditional demand curve drawn in economics is the inverse demand curve. Ideally क्या होना चाहिए? Quantity is a function of price, no? Price is not a function of quantity. तो quantity होना चाहिए था y axis पे और price होना चाहिए था x axis पे. But जो पहला demand curve derive हुआ economics में वो मार्शल ने किया था. And for Marshall, it was the quantity which was on the x axis, because Marshall took quantity as the factor affecting marginal utility, which was quite valid. That is, when you change the quantity, marginal utility gets changed. Marshall then simply derived his demand curve using quantity here, keeping price on the y-axis, not realizing mathematically that he's actually deriving an inverse demand curve. You understand that? What we are deriving here is P as a function of Q, P on the y-axis. But then for Marshall it was quite a normal thing to do, because for him it was the change in quantity which was changing everything. So he said, look, change in quantity is changing everything, we will draw it like this. When I will teach you Marshallian equilibrium also, you will see that Marshall was assuming it from quantity side, that how quantity would change and then things will change. So that was the Marshallian idea, and that is why you draw the demand curve always with price on the y-axis and quantity on x-axis, while mathematically it should have been the opposite. But this is the derivation of demand curve by Marshall. Do I believe it makes sense to you? Yes, yes. Because see, mathematically the rule is that whatever is on the y-axis is a function of x-axis, isn't it? But in this case, actually what you have on the x-axis is a function of what's there on the y-axis. Price change is bringing all these changes, no? The whole assumption was that when price changes from 2 to 4, then demand falls from 4 to 2. वो भी वहीं से आया था. जब अभी सप्लाई कर्व भी डिराइव करूंगा, सप्लाई कर्व के लिए जिम्मेदार जीवॉन्स हैं, उन्होंने सप्लाई कर्व डिराइव किया था, बट उन लोगों को मैथ्स नहीं आती थी। ऑलराइट, और ये कोई मजाक में नहीं कह रहा हूं मैं, ये सीरियस बात है। दे डिडंट अप्लाई मैथ्स टू इकोनॉमिक्स. Maths was applied to economics for the first time by J.R. Hickes. Hickes was the one who brought maths into economics, so now you know whom to find. You know, yeah. But Hickes was the one who gave indifference curve theory, and Hickes was the one who gave ISLM theory. So he started bringing maths into economics, talking a lot of algebra into economics, and later on people like Samuelson, people like Arrow, people, and then people like Kuznets, they brought even more and more maths into economics. I mean, you might be surprised, but till as late as 1948, economists were not knowing maths at all, leave alone calculus or something. They would just go ahead and draw it randomly. It was only after 1948 that maths started entering economics, and it was only after 1970 that rigorous mathematics started entering economics. That some rigorously defined numbers were found. So around 1970, not after, but around 1970s, 1968, Milton Friedman was the one who brought in a lot of rigor in maths to economics. So that is how it happened. So all of us are products of last 40, 50 years. That is the aspect. Some of you at Delhi School of Economics, if you are from there, you will find it hard to believe, because there the language is maths. So that is the basic idea, that when you see that maths is pretty new to economics, so these guys would do this elementary mistake. But I'm sure you understand the derivation part here. I'm going to give you a write-up on that. You take that up. Sure, Pavneet, it can be done. Actually, Sandeep sir is back with us today. Yesterday he was busy, so he was not there. He will upload the whole notes for you on the group. Don't worry. All right. Let's see this then. When you give a heading, derivation of Marshallian demand curve. Derivation of Marshallian demand curve. And you write in that, Marshall derived his demand curve. Marshall derived his demand curve using law of diminishing marginal utility. Law of, you can write diminishing mu, of course, marginal utility, full stop. If ratio of mux and mum, if ratio of mux and mum is taken on x-axis, y-axis, is taken on y-axis along with price on y-axis, make it price of commodity on y-axis, along with price of commodity on y-axis, and quantity consumed or demanded, quantity consumed or demanded is taken on x-axis, then the intersection of downward sloping line, intersection of downward sloping line representing downward sloping line representing MUX by MUM with the horizontal line representing price, comma, represents consumer's equilibrium. Represents consumer's equilibrium. Full stop. At price equal to rupees 2, or make it px, because in the exam you should not be using numbers generally, you should be using the symbols. Alright, that is what is advisable. कि जब एग्जाम, ये तो मैंने तुम्हें समझाने के लिए 2 रुपीज 4 रुपीज किया, जब आप एग्जाम में लिखो तो बेहतर है कि आप symbols use करो. It's always good if you use px, p dash x rather than using 2 and 4. So you write at price equal to px and quantity at qx, there is intersection between the two in upper panel of the figure. Full stop. This gives us one combination, and write them like coordinates. Write them something like this: qx, comma px. This gives us one combination, and write it like this: qx, comma px. One combination qx, comma px, such that there is equilibrium for consumer. Full stop. Point E1 in lower panel, represents this combination, when price is taken on y-axis, and quantity consumed is taken on x-axis. Price is taken on y-axis and quantity consumed is taken on x-axis. I hope we are okay on that. In the same thing, you please write similarly, when price rises to px dash, the horizontal line shifts up, and new equilibrium and new equilibrium for the consumer, new equilibrium for the consumer is derived at point E2 in the upper panel, at point E2 in the upper panel, where quantity consumed also falls, where quantity consumed also falls to Qx dash. Quantity consumed also falls, this second one, all right, to Qx dash. All right, in the upper panel it is written as 2, but we will keep calling it as Qx dash. Like whatever we wrote as 4, this is our Qx and this is our Qx dash. All right, so the equilibrium changes to this E2 and quantity consumed falls to Qx dash. This is what we are calling Px and this is what we are calling Px dash. I hope it makes sense to you from the lower panel. And you write, I'm deliberately giving you this write-up so that you learn how to write it in the exam if you are describing any derivation. Don't leave it on the examiner to fathom what you mean. You know? कि आप ये नहीं छोड़ोगे कि तुम तो एग्जामिनर हो, तुम्हें तो सब पता ही है, देख लो क्या चुनना चाहते हो, कुछ फ्रेम भी कर लेना, मुझे नंबर दे देना, फिर वो गड़बड़ हो जाती है. So I'm giving you the details that this is the way you should be methodical while writing your descriptions so that you don't give any chance to the examiner to make you lose marks. You know, that is the difference between, in these, see, if they ask you this kind of a question for 10 marks, normally these are 10 markers, then they're giving you a nice gift. 7.5 is a possibility. Maximize that 7.5, maybe 8, by doing everything correct. Because there will be questions where you may be struggling for a 4 out of 10 or at 5 out of 20. तो उनको मैनेज ऐसे ही होता है फिर वो कि जब तुम एक अच्छे वाले में 7, 7.5, 8 वाली हरकत करते हो, then even if you have attempted something worth say 230 properly, you may still end up getting at 150 out of that. So that is what I'm trying to teach you right now, that optimize the things, don't remain lazy. Also remember, मैंने जहाँ पर ये सारी बात लिखी तो ये सारी बातें लिख रहा हूँ. ऑलराइट, मैंने यहाँ पूरा प्राइस लिखा, सिर्फ P लिखकर नहीं छोड़ दिया, सिर्फ Q लिख के नहीं छोड़ दिया. क्यों Q लिख के छोड़ते हो? So be careful. Don't leave it with things around. Write everything because the examiner will be interested in checking all that. The fellow is interested in finding how sincere you are in your approach to your answer. That is why I'm trying to teach you all of that. Sometimes, see, it's not that you are insincere. Sometimes you can be in a hurry and you can say, okay, let's write a P, let's write a Q, and let's go ahead. But that is where you get penalized. And they start deducting marks. So just don't let that happen. Develop as a habit. ये आदत बना लोगे तो खुद ही लिखने लगोगे हर जगह. You know, so just habit should be there, that I will write it as this. All right. Now see, in fact, one more thing. In your optional paper, please don't use your WhatsApp language. You know, that's another danger part I see happening. आप थोड़े बहुत shortcuts use करो, एक बार use कर लो, जैसे MC marginal cost लिखा, bracket में लिखे MC, उसके बाद तुम लिखो MC. The examiner understands what it is, you know. But when you start using all those through, you know, अब आप हरकत पे आ गए फिर, you know, because people correcting your paper can be sometimes 20 years elder than me also. तो मेरी ही उम्र हो गई, उनकी तो और ज़्यादा हो गई, तो आपके इस थ्रू को पास थ्रू कर देते हैं. So be careful, don't do these errors. They're just habitual errors. We end up doing them because we are used to writing like that, and then we don't realize where we went wrong. And that can make a difference between a 65% and a 40%. You know, that becomes the difference part. Because remember, and I'm sure you would, that when you are attempting 19 questions in one paper, that's what each paper will demand from you. That means 38 questions you will attempt in optional. If you gain an extra 1 mark also or half a mark also in each question, that means 20 marks. And the opposite holds if you lose that. You know, and this 1 mark, half a mark is entirely examiner's subjectivity. That why does somebody give us 7.5 and why 8? the person giving it also doesn't know at times. So I'm trying to mold you that how you can be liked by them. That is my only purpose. You know, that how that liking can develop, that okay, these people are sincere and doing things and they have read the textbook. ये जितने notes मैंने बनाए हैं, आपके जो textbook standard बोलता हूँ पढ़ना चाहिए, उन्हीं को पढ़ के उन्हीं को चोरी करके बनाया है. पर्पस ये है कि एग्जामिनर्स इनको देखकर ये आप जब लिखो ये तो एग्जामिनर्स को ये लगे आप वो किताब पढ़ कर आए हो. You know, that is why the language becomes important in that sense. If you see, I am as repetitive like H.L. Ahuja. All right, but that is what they are used to. So, but there is no harm in if it gets me marks. As I told you yesterday, be boring but be effective, and that's more important than being flashy but being ineffective. You know, always keep that in mind. All right, you take this up further. In the same thing you write. So falls to Qx dash full stop. Point E2 can be traced in the lower panel. Point E2 can be traced in the lower panel taking a combination Qx dash Px dash, same way within the bracket, Qx dash comma Px dash, and close the bracket. This is about expressing them like coordinates. All right, so Qx dash Px dash full stop, joining points like E1 and E2, joining points like E1 and E2 in lower panel, joining points like E1 and E2 in lower panel, one can derive the downward sloping demand curve, full stop. According to Marshall, demand curve showed inverse relation between price and quantity, demanded due to law of diminishing marginal utility. So ever in the interview these questions are put. IES interview last year this question was put to the people, that why is demand curve downward sloping in case of Marshallian functions. So Marshall always put it on law of diminishing marginal utility, that due to law of diminishing MU, demand curve goes downward sloping. All right, so whenever they ask you why is it downward sloping, it is due to diminishing marginal utility. You just give a heading where I'll stop there, but it's just for me for tomorrow. You write law of equi-marginal utility. Law of equi-marginal utility. EQUI. Law of equi-marginal utility. EQUI. All right, then we'll stop here today. We'll begin from here tomorrow. Again, 2:50. I'll see you then. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Handwriting should be legible, Vikramaditya, nothing more than that. Money is a commodity, Surbi. It's kind of a numeraire commodity. हाँ नहीं, अभी आगे चलेंगे तो इनवर्स डिमांड कर्व बोलेंगे इसको. होगा डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग ही, ठीक है. सेम थिंग, इनवर्स रिलेशन, लेकिन वो लॉ ऑफ डिमिनिशिंग एमयू से नहीं होता, वो बिकॉज ऑफ कंज्यूमर बिहेवियर से होता है, जो ऑर्डिनल यूटिलिटी में पढ़ाऊंगा अभी, ठीक है। और 12th वालों को नहीं परेशान करते, ठीक है। फ्री हैंड, फ्री हैंड, बस प्रैक्टिस कर लेना कि लाइन टेढ़ी मेढ़ी ना हो और फ्री हैंड ड्रॉ कर दो। थैंक यू। एक्चुअली कुछ कोई एचएल अहूजा एक ऐसी जगह है जहाँ सारी थ्योरीज हैं, तो इसीलिए लोग कह देते हैं कि वहां से पढ़ लो। अच्छा अच्छा, देखो, कंज्यूमर गुड का जो ग्रोथ था, उसकी सप्लाई कम हो रही थी, सप्लाई, हाँ, ग्रोथ की, हाँ, और डिमांड बढ़ रही थी, ठीक ठीक है। अब डिमांड क्यों बढ़ रही थी? क्योंकि पॉपुलेशन बढ़ रहा था, इनकम लेवल्स थोड़े हायर हो रहे थे, ठीक है। तो इसकी वजह से क्या हो रहा था कि एक तरफ डिमांड ज़्यादा है, सप्लाई कम है, तो शॉर्टेज हो गई, और शॉर्टेज की वजह से इन्फ्लेशन आ, ठीक है। हाँ हाँ, the difference is only in the interpretation, Ashu. MUX by MUM means satisfaction derived in terms of money, while MUX by PX means satisfaction from each unit derived after paying for it. PDF बना के भेज दो कृष्ण कुमार. Yeah, we are assuming it doesn't follow the law of DMU, correct, Surbi? Yes, yes. हाँ, कि अगर कोई प्राइवेट हैं पहले से तो उनको डिस्टर्ब नहीं किया जाएगा, और अगर नहीं है तब उनको आने नहीं दिया जाएगा. Will not be allowed. हाँ, all future investments to be done only by public sector. That way. No, even in the lower panel. That traced with QXPX. हाँ, वो E1 होना चाहिए था. Actually, it should be point E1 can be traced in the lower panel. ये मुझे कल याद दिला देना, तुम तो E1 कर ही लो अभी. हाँ, एक्चुअली मैं E1 और E2 उल्टा माइंड में सोच रहा था, इसीलिए, ठीक है. हाँ हाँ, नहीं, मैं तो अभी बताता हूँ तुम्हें, एक सेकेंड. MUM is constant, yes, Pritha. So if MUX is constant, then MUX has to rise, and MUX rises only when demand falls. All right, that is because of diminishing margin. See, diminishing marginal utility says what? If you consume more, your utility falls, and if you consume less, your utility rises. No, you don't need to read any book, Aditya. Difference or marginal utility of money means satisfaction from 1 unit of rupee, Deepthi, and marginal utility of price. No, there is no MU of price. Price is the money you pay for that commodity, and MU of money is satisfaction you derive from 1 unit of money. They are two completely different things. Vigneshwaram, the difference is how you look, which is the independent variable and which is the dependent variable. Y is equal to fx, x is the independent variable, x is equal to fy, y is the independent variable. It's an assumption, Deepthi. We started the class with that. MU of money is constant. Yes, yes. नहीं, वो जीरो मतलब मैं इसके बाद डिससेटिस्फाइड हो जाऊंगा. तो अगर ये कमोडिटी फ्री की होती तो मैं यहां तक कंज्यूम करता, बट ये कमोडिटी फ्री की नहीं है, पैसे दे रहे हैं, तो इसलिए यहां तक रुक जाते हैं, ठीक है. इसमें एक कंक्लूजन होना चाहिए ज़रूर, ठीक है? तो वो कंक्लूजन पुट करके देखना, कंटेंट ठीक है, इंट्रोडक्शन भी ठीक है, कंक्लूजन मिसिंग है, तो एक कंक्लूजन दोगे ज़रूर। कंक्लूजन में लिख सकते हो दैट development of an economy is based on both sustainability and efficiency. So evergreen revolution focuses on both sustainability and efficiency. इस पीरियड में सेविंग इन्वेस्टमेंट के बाद भी ग्रोथ क्यों नहीं हुआ, उसके एक दो पॉइंट्स और डाल सकते हो। और यहाँ भी सिमिलरली सेविंग इन्वेस्टमेंट के स्टैग्नेंट होने पे भी ग्रोथ क्यों हो गया, वो पॉइंट्स आने, क्योंकि क्वेश्चन ही वही है, रिलेटिंग सेविंग इन्वेस्टमेंट विद ग्रोथ, लिंक करना है। अगेन फिर एक कंक्लूजन लिखोगे that therefore saving and investment have operated with a lag in Indian context, that periods of high saving and investment have been followed by periods of growth. Also, it has depended on the institutional mechanism and government policies created in the country. ठीक है? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Vikas. Yes, yes. It's better that if अच्छा मैंने ठीक है। Looks fine. The word limit will have to be controlled. All right. So what I suggest is examples can be controlled and explanation can be reduced, but content is fine. Sure. Marginal utility can be average utility if marginal remains constant, Vigneshwaran. So if marginal is constant, then marginal will be equal to average. Good. All points are covered here. Yeah. Yeah. No, in agriculture we didn't have much public sector involvement except for FCI and all. And similarly in services also it was mostly governance related services, otherwise mostly in private hands. Banking of course was one service, and finance and banking was one service in public hand, but otherwise mostly in private hand. All right. Welcome. Okay, people online, I'll see you tomorrow at 2:50 then. Bye-bye.